All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Chantel Lopez, and I'm here with a lot of gorgeous women, including my co-host, Ann Bishop. Hi, Ann. How's it going? You're looking beautiful in that blue top, I have to say. Well, it's a really special episode because it is our 50th episode. And if I'm being totally honest, these things usually escape me. I'm like, oh, shit, it's the 50th episode. We should have planned something. But luckily, we have such an amazing team. And just to give a little shout out to Haley Gernert, who is our ops manager, like 2 months ago, she was like, hey, it's almost the 50th episode. You should really do something special. So here we are. We're doing something special, and we are joined by four women who have been working with us in various forms for a lot of years now. So thanks, ladies, for being here. We're going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and to participate in our ritual, what's in process, what's in progress, and anything to christen the episode before we dive in.
Welcome. And welcome to all who are listening. I know you'll gain a lot of insights beyond what Chantel and I share.
Awesome. So we are going to be talking about impact. So we've invited the women on the show today to share with us how moving through life and work with this polyvagal or nervous system lens has changed and shaped and guided them. But before we do that, so we have a thing. What are you drinking? Hey, I two-fisted, as I sometimes do. We're gonna give everybody an opportunity to share this. This is something Ann and I have talked about before, and I think it's kind of clever because the science says that this act of ingesting, sharing drinks, sharing food is evidence that we're socially connected, that we're ventral, that we feel safe enough, but it also cultivates connection and community. So we invited everybody to bring a cozy drink with them. I'm drinking two things. This is my favorite, like hot coffee cup, and there's a sticker that says Plant Lady, which I'm stoked about. This is orange clove tea, but in celebration of the 50th episode, I'm also drinking Prosecco out of a mug that somebody on the call actually made. So I'm super excited. Thanks, Gina, for that. And I'm going to go ahead and just get us going. What's in process? What's in progress? Oh, so much, as Sarah was saying earlier. Well, to be kind of like super specific, I had an injection in my hip this morning, which I was feeling super, super trepidatious about. But it was not fun. It was uncomfortable and, but really a necessity for diagnosing more of what's going on with some chronic pain I've been having. And I'm just really like, riding this interesting roller coaster this morning of like, is it hurting? Is it not hurting? What's hurting? Does it hurt when I do this? Does it not hurt? Because the injection went through my hip flexor, right? So it went through, as we know, many of us, lots of tissue to get into the joint. And it was two injections. It was one to numb the tissue and the joint. And then it was a second one to like go in with a big needle and shoot some numbing agent into the joint in and around the labrum. So, it's just very interesting to be with that as I move around in the world. It's like, is it hurting because of the injection itself, or is that muscle hurting, or is that pain? I'm really trying not to grasp at like, please let the pain go away. Please let the pain go away. Because of course that's what I want. But if the pain goes away, it means that the labrum is torn, which also means potentially having surgery, which I don't want to have to do. So that is the immediate thing that's in process and progress for me. And I'm glad to have this beautiful diversion of attention. So that's it for me. Ann, you want to go next?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would say what's in progress, what's in process for me is this morning. We've had some rain here in Northern California, and that always makes me feel a bit more cozy. So I've been enjoying that. And my oldest child, she's technically my stepdaughter, but we don't always call each other like stepmom or stepdaughter. So I'm going to call her my oldest child. She recently moved back to the area after about 3 years away. And just as a mom, even though, she's in her early 20s, I'm just really enjoying that she's here. So last night we did the time of this recording is during the winters. So we have Christmas coming up and the holidays. So we spent some time doing that. And I could tell there was a moment when my husband and I exchanged glances and all the kids were doing their things. And it was a good moment. So I'm thankful. And I'm thankful that I have language about expanding joy in those situations, because it just wasn't something on my radar in the past. So I'm thankful. And we'll dive into that shortly. All right. And I have one of these favorite cups. It was also handmade, but by someone from a local farmer's market. And my brother gave it to my husband, but I have taken it over because it feels quite good. And I have a hot cup of coffee here. It is just past lunch, and I always have one cup, usually just one, but usually one cup after lunch. And that's what I'm enjoying at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. All right, ladies. So a little introduction. What are you drinking? Where are you at in the world? And then what's in process? What's in progress? Anybody want to jump in? Feel free.
You can start.
Brittany, go for it.
Yeah, so I'm Brittany. I have known, Chantel for quite a long time now. I went through my Pilates teacher training with Chantel, and then did the Pilates Masters program with Anne and Chantel several years ago, and then did the NSIF training with them. So we've been circling around each other for quite a while. So I do teach Pilates and movement, and then I also am an NSIF facilitator and do energy coaching and blended too. So I am drinking I'm very German themed today. I realize I'm drinking out of my Neuschwanstein mug from Germany, and I'm drinking, it's called Alpenkrauter tea, and it's like a herbal tea from Germany. Nice. Feels very cozy, and it's actually quite grounding because it just connects me to my roots. And so brings me joy to drink out of this mug and have a little taste of my family and my history. So what is in process for me? I don't know. I know Anne and Chantel know, but I'm not sure if you other ladies know, but I'm pregnant. It's my first child, and navigating pregnancy is quite a new experience for me. Just like the moment to moment changes and how I'm feeling physically and emotionally and hormones and this and that. So even just this morning, I had a moment where I was getting ready for my day, and all of a sudden it was like, whoosh, I don't feel good. I think I'm going to be sick. Okay, hold on. Just take a pause for a second. Now I feel totally fine. It just goes up and down quite a bit. And so being able to be flexible right now and to just be able to shift gears when I need to has been quite the practice lately. I'll just say that. I'm kind of enjoying all of it, even the yucky stuff, like not feeling well physically, because it's just such a new experience and I'm trying to stay curious about it. But I've noticed I've had to really let go of controlling, trying to make really solid plans. I've just had to be really flexible lately. So that has just brought up some interesting things for me. So that is what I'm currently navigating and enjoying in its own interesting way.
Awesome. Well, congratulations again. If you're listening to the podcast, you won't be able to see the love that's coming out of everybody here on the screen. And if you're watching, you can see that. I know Gina's having lots of feels about it because Gina and Brittany went through their NSIF program together. Oh, with Sarah. So yeah, congratulations. And it's wonderful to just be able to witness you going through that experience. I'll be curious to hear more. All right, who'd like to go next? Yeah, Sarah, go for it.
Sorry, Gina. I'm Sarah DeGia, and I'm also a Pilates movement teacher. I teach from several different modalities, from Melt Method, the Franklin Method. I like to integrate those things. And my studio is in the Chicagoland suburbs. That's where I'm at. So I'm drinking a yogi tea. And it's the Breathe tea. So it has this thyme and licorice and eucalyptus in it. And I just thought it was really appropriate for today. drinking it in my commercially made Disney mug.
Nice.
But it's one that I thought was a special. You can't see it, but it says main squeeze. So
nice.
My husband says big cheese, and I'm the main squeeze. So
I love it.
Mickey's on there. So big cheese and main squeeze. Why not? So what's in process and what's in progress? What's in progress? Well, it is winter. It's in the single digits, and it was -6 this morning. So so that's cold. And that brings to that feeling of wanting to be just wrapped and cozy and protected. But even as I was walking today in the cold, and I knew it wasn't a short walk, like I could just bear it, that the process was like, I can even try to enjoy this cold. I'm thankful even for the cold. So what this work is interesting to me is that I can take, you were saying, Brittany, and congratulations, by the way, big hugs from me. But that you can kind of just take the moments that are so unpleasant and just, you can still be with it and not be just too much in the complaint of it. Nobody likes it to be that bitter cold, but I was like, well, I can feel how warm and cozy I am in my coat only because it's that cold. So I can be
way to reframe.
I can be very grateful for contrasts in life like that. That I can. So I am appreciating those times, and that's sort of part of the progress and process without having to get into kind of like the ups and downs that are happening right now and ongoing. But that's how it goes.
Yeah. I love that. There's a theme emerging, I feel like, being present and expanding joy even in the face of things that could be or are dysregulating, right? Just expanding our capacity to be with all of the experiences, maybe without resistance, is kind of what I'm hearing. All right, Miss Gina, I think leaned in, and then we'll go to Trinity, and then we'll dig into these questions.
Yeah, I'm Gina, and I'm sitting here in New Orleans thinking it's cold, but New Orleans cold and Chicago cold, not the same. So it's, I think, 50 here, but to me, that's quite cold. So I have and I'm having a licorice spice tea, which is a tea that is my favorite that I made me happy to choose because it's also Chantil's son Charlie's favorite. And so I always think of him when I make it. And I'm having it out of a mug that one of my pottery teachers made here in New Orleans. And it's very beautiful and angular, and it makes me happy to hold it. There's like shiny bits and rough bits, and it's tactile. I like it. What's in progress and process? So many things. And Anne, I'll be interested to talk more a little bit later about expanding joy, because that's kind of on my radar too. But I've noticed in the last week or so, the process that I'm in is really actually being with as my business. I am a somatic coach and also an organization consultant, and I use the nervous system work to help me support leaders both in their own personal leadership journey, but also with organizational change. And I have a huge project that I launched this week, and I have not been this busy in quite a while. And the intensity with which the work is coming at me reminds me of a prior life. And it's been really interesting to notice what arises, like what shape my body wants to make in the context of the demands of work, and also just how quickly I'm able to notice it and go, oh. Like even just saying that, I was like, ooh. I was like, oh no. But just being with like the tension and then observing it and having tools to shift it is something I'm really grateful for. But the process of learning to be this shape when work is really intense is new. It's been real easy to do that when work has been a little less busy. Some new skills on the edge of my growth edge right now. And, of course, feeling grateful to have the opportunity to bring this work in a greater way to a bigger organization, which also feels juicy. So also thinking about how to do that in like the most impactful way possible, given circumstances being what they are sometimes, like the context. So
yeah. I'm reading you loud and clear. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Gina. Okay, Trinity.
I'm Trinity. I'm here in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas in northeastern California, and I am a Pilates teacher. And what I refer to as a punk rock approach to Pilates teaching, which includes a lot of funny enough, like heart-centered approach, and then obviously nervous system approach to things. And I am drinking turmeric tea from Numi. That's how we say that. And I'm drinking out of this little mason jar because this is what I have in my studio. I don't throw away cups with my little water dispenser over there. I have jars, so I haul those back and forth and wash them and don't throw the thing away, don't throw the paper away. And for whatever reason, I like that. And process and progress. So I am an empty nester. So my sons are all raised. My youngest is 21. And what felt very strange and foreign after all those years of raising children and then everybody's gone just feels so spacious now. So definitely having that and that expanding my capacity to have that amount of spaciousness and to like, well, what do I want to do? So I'm come January, I'm going to start learning American Sign Language. Because that's like in my heart. For those of you who don't know, I've had hearing loss my whole life. I've been wearing hearing aids for the last couple of years. And I feel super grateful to be able to embrace that in a different way now, whereas before it's pretty isolating and feels like you have to ask for special care from people, which I don't want to do, but turns out like it's fine. Like you can ask for that. You can, whatever, move into it in a different way. So that's my process. This like all my babies are grown up and adults and amazing and beautiful and successful. And I'm, coming out of that feeling of being lonely and a BB in a shoebox a little bit into all this spaciousness. Like I can do whatever I want. I'm like a teenager, but smarter. So that's sweet. And then progress is a little 6-week program, 6-week masterclass series that I launched in the first week of November. This Saturday is the 5th of the six classes. And that is going so well. And it's clunky and awkward and uneven. And it's really rad at the same time. And in the past, like, whatever, just to touch on the nervous system, right? Like in the past, it has and would have put me in freeze state. And so now I'm like, that sucked a little. Oh, well, like, onward. So yeah, that's my process and progress. And I'm drinking turmeric tea. I don't know if I said that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love this. I love this for you. And I'm actually thinking about coming to the class tomorrow. I got your email. I know. I
Saturday, but yeah.
Yeah, Saturday. Oh, I'll be on a plane. Damn. All right. Well, maybe I'll register and catch the replay.
Yeah. I would be happy to send that to you.
Oh, okay. Great. This is so awesome. So we want to launch into our conversation. We have 3 questions, and the ladies have been primed and prepped for the questions. And so they're going to share with us or not share with us their answers. So the very first question is just, what's your nervous system origin story? So my impetus in asking this is, I am so deeply driven to share this work with people that I find that oftentimes the first roadblock is, what is it? Like, I get it. I get what you're talking about, but I don't actually know what you're talking about. So I really wanted to give listeners, particularly the listeners who are not in the somatics or body-based realms, or maybe have been, but been disembodied, because we have found that to be a thing, just an opportunity to say like, oh, how might I touch this? How might I enter this? What could I start to attend to or be curious about? So that's my impetus for asking this question. And we'll see what arises. Is there anybody feeling compelled to jump into this question first?
I'll jump in first, I guess.
All right, I'll do it.
All right. I thought it was an interesting question, Chantel, origin story. I was like, oh, it's like
I've watched a lot of Marvel comics.
Yes, I know, like a superhero. Where's my origin? I had to think about it a little bit because, but what came up for me is that I through a training that I went through, that's with Sue Hitzman, I think I can say that. So it was the MELT method. I had known about the nervous system, but I didn't understand the relationship of connective tissue being in the nervous system. And I feel like this is my origin story because it's during that training that she talked about the vagus nerve. It's like, oh, vagus, what's this vagus nerve thing again? So fight, flight, freeze. And so just beginning to understand that through a method of addressing your connective tissue and through breath, that I could like change a state of myself or a person that I'm working with. It's like, oh, I can do that. We can do that. Oh, I mean, we do that. Right. So it was just this like, oh yeah, we do that as movement people. Yeah, I do that. But it was this just the first door opening to me and just really grasping the fact that there was this thing called the vagus nerve. I didn't know about the polyvagal theory at the point, but that there was an influence to be had through breath and connective tissue address, right? Through movement and connective tissue. So I feel like, oh, this means so much to me because now it also tapped my, like, as a Pilates teacher, you're looking for signs of how you can help the person. And in that practice, I learned, oh, now I recognize also when a person is in a state that is maybe a high anxiety state or something like that. And it was just enough. It wasn't as in depth as what we do, of course, in the NSIF, but it definitely was like my just the drop in to start my curiosity in this direction.
Yeah,
I would say that's my origin story, if you want to say.
Well, it's kind of fun to say, so we'll keep saying it.
I love it.
Yeah. So I want to just, before we move on, just invite us to all be off of mute potentially, and feel free to be in conversation. So if you relate to something, if you have a question about something, like let's, really just want this to be a dialogue and an exchange. So is there anything in that for anybody else who wants to share next their origin story?
I resonated with what you said because for me, it's like a small little moment. And then you look at where I am now. I've now graduated as an NSI facilitator and like really dove in, but this has been like years in the making to get to this point. And it was kind of like a light bulb moment. So when I was in the Pilates Masters program, Anna and Chantel introduced the nervous system work in that program. And it reminds me a lot of when I first discovered Pilates, where it connected with me and it clicked at this very deep level, but I didn't know why yet, but I was super curious to find out more. Like, I remember the first time I got on the Pilates reformer and I did like feet and straps or something. I'm like, I don't understand this yet, but holy cow, this is the thing that I've been looking for. And it was kind of the same thing with the nervous system work, where we went through some of the vagal toning exercises and I could immediately feel this shift in my body. And I'm like, this is really intriguing. I don't understand it yet, but I can already feel the effects of this. Mm-hmm. So then it kind of went down a rabbit trail. And I was, I would consider myself a dabbler for years after that. I could explain, the autonomic nervous system and polyvagal theory in like a very Cliff Notes way, like very broad, basic way. And I was also pulling it in just little things that I had learned in the Pilates Masters program with my clients and seeing the impact it had on them. And it was like, wow, this is really making a difference just with this little amount. So what happens if I like really go all in on this and make this a part of, what I'm offering to people? So for me, it was like this initial, this drawing into and then following down that trail over the course of years. So that was kind of my journey. I think, of course, starting in Pilates Masters program, but then little pings of it over the years until I really decided to go all in last year and complete the NSIF program.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this. I love when we feel tugged, right? Mm-hmm. Like we can feel the tug of something is so powerful, even if it takes a long time to kind of come to full iteration. But I love hearing I'm just thinking like, oh, it's the tug, right? What was the tug? What was the like spark of enough curiosity for you to go, what's something here? What is here? I think Trinity, you were leaning in earlier to share.
Yeah, I have a similar experience as Brittany. So my origin story. So I also took my teacher training with Chantel in 2012, and then
What?
I know. And then in the way I remember it is that somewhere in the summer, maybe May of 2015, Chantel said this thing to me about the polyvagal theory and about the nervous system. And the thing I remember her saying so often is like, there's just some things you can't think your way through. There's some things you can't think your way through. And so I had this interesting experience because I wanted to learn about it. And it's so heady, right? Like I bought the book and I was like, my pea brain is not gonna like, I don't even, geez, right? So that kind of like, that what's it? I don't know what this is. And I keep trying to use my cognition to make sense of it. But those little moments where I describe them as that's nice moments where you're doing a thing and you're like, oh, that's nice. So I and I actually give that to my clients as homework. I'm like, you're gonna this week between when I see you now and next week, we're gonna like whatever. When you have a little thing, a moment, a cup of tea, a bath, a bite of delicious whatever. Like it can be whatever. Like let yourself really notice those. That's nice moments.
Oh my God, I'm totally stealing that. by the way, I will give you credit, but I'm stealing it immediately.
And it has been, I have not been through your facilitator program, but I've just worked so closely with you with all this stuff because at some point I worked alongside Chantel and Anne in the master's program, off and on probably a couple of times. And then Chantel and I went to New York and saw Stephen Porges talk in like about 5 minutes before the first COVID shutdown. We got home and maybe 2 minutes later, or 2 days rather, 2 days later. The whole world changed and shut down, and which is just so interesting timing, and then very recently, I've had this embodied expansion of my understanding of what this is and what it is for me and how I'm applying it to my clients and how I'm seeing it, because I want to, like Brittany said, right? Like we offer this Cliff Notes version. We're trying to make it digestible for people that it's a brand new conversation for them. And so I've even like backed off of that just a little bit because for me, I know I just go so much into my cognition and, anyway, so letting people just really notice those that's nice moments and, what's happening there. And so, I mean, it's a absolute foundational piece to everything I do personally and professionally. And like I said, like a more expansive, embodied understanding of it, just maybe in the last 6 months, even it's been, this next summer will be 10 years that this has been on my radar, and I've been working on it in different ways and sometimes more and sometimes less. And so, yeah, that's my origin stories with Chantel.
Awesome. I love it. I'm going to point us over to Gina because one, I want to say in that moment, you and I were headed to New York. Gina was also supposed to go to New York. I don't know if you remember this, Gina. And you were like, oh no, they're not letting us go. And I don't know if you want me to say what you were doing or who you were working for, but you were like, they're not, no, they're like this thing, they're shutting us down. I was like, well, fuck that thing. Trinity and I are going. I was like, I don't know what that thing is. We're going to New York. So we went to New York. And as we were in New York, I remember we're hearing the news, and we got home, and the only thing I could think of is like, oh my God, I was on the subway. I have touched so many surfaces. I was like, I was literally thinking about, holding on to all of it.
Yes.
Oh my God. Yeah. Crazy. So Gina, you were leaning in earlier when Trinity was talking, I think maybe about the that's nice moments, but it's hard in this kind of digital space to to converse. So yeah, what was on your mind?
Oh, I just was loving that, and that idea of that's nice. Although it's funny because that's nice is an interesting one for me. Like meaning making wise, I'm like, that's nice. Is that positive or negative? Interesting. But
Right. Are you being facetious or serious?
But I was on a call with some ladies yesterday, and one of them was saying, she's like, oh, we were talking about the mechanics like of trying to manage calendars and like being busy and stress. And it was a women's group I host. And she was saying, but I really just savor my morning routine. And the way she said savor, I was like, ooh, like, and it was just so juicy, this idea of like, what are you savoring? And it reminds me again of Anne I'm talking about the ability to expand positive state, which I'm so grateful for. Because my whole life I've been a problem to be fixed until pretty recently. So it's nice to just find those things to savor or that's nice moments and really notice them and let them fill you up. So I was just appreciating that, Trinity.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for that.
My origin story is kind of a like a nexus of things. Like personally dabbling around in different kinds of therapy and realizing like you can think your way out of some of these trauma stories and discovering somatic experiencing around the same time that in my work I was doing a lot of change architecture and change leadership and really noticing that you also can't solely think your way through that, which led me down a bit of a rabbit hole around constructive adult development theory, which is a really beautiful theory around how adults grow, but also is very heady. And realizing that I really wanted the capacity to meet people just not only in their cognition to support change, but really to meet them in their whole self. And I went down a whole kind of course of study over the last probably 6 or 7 years around somatics and somatic coaching engagements and all of these different kinds of pieces. And then Chantel and I were having a conversation one day about, surprisingly, the ways in which our work is becoming ever more similar, even though on paper, like our jobs are really not the same at all, except for that they are. And she was like, you should check out this NSI facilitator thing. And I was like, okay. And the ways in which, like anything, I don't know, when you go to study a thing, you think, I'm going to learn this thing. Well, really, I'm going to take myself apart and put myself together. And in doing that, I'm going to learn this thing. And so,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it has been transformative in my own way of making sense of the shapes that I make in my body and how I'm able to expand or shift state, but also instrumental in being able to bring language and tools and practices to the work that I do with leaders in a different way, which I really appreciate. So.
Yeah. Okay. I want to circle back as we close this, our first question. I want to circle back to Anne. I see her writing notes and I can see and feel the percolation. So what's on your mind around these origin stories or your own, Anne?
Yes, I'd like to just honor what everyone said. And I think when each of you went through your own story, I was like, oh, I see myself, or I see the contrast of my experience, right? Because sometimes it's not the same. It's like a different experience. And so for me, I'd love to share that origin story. I think it might be supportive because it's a little different for me. Again, I was also introduced to it via Chantel through our work together. So I hadn't seen it, hadn't seen any, short videos or reels. I hadn't seen it on the internet. I hadn't come across a book. I'd heard Chantel talk about it, and then we went into practice. And the real way I've practiced this work almost 100% is in an online format. And I practiced it with Chantel, and I hired Trinity one time. She came to my studio and we did a day there, which was lovely. But to be totally frank, I was a bit resistant to the work.
I was going to say that.
I was rather resistant to it. In the past, I had heard that, maybe the science wasn't strong enough behind the work. And coming from a scientific background, I just was like, I don't know, like what's to make sense of here. But like what Gina said is there was it was like a web of things coming together. So one of the things that really first moved me was a little bit more through the intellectual piece, which was I've been very curious in body awareness. And Stephen Porges essentially had what he called at the time, who's the person who developed the polyvagal theory at North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And he had like a body awareness scale. And I was sort of using that. But the body awareness questions that he was asking in the scale, to me, had no connection to my experience of body awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So as someone who taught movement for many years, my experience of body awareness was proprioception, of understanding where my body was in space. And he was asking questions like, well, what's your gut feeling? Are you swallowing a lot? And
Right.
I'm like, why would I even pay attention to those things? Like, I really had a disinterest in those types of things. And so the science has come a really far way. And I think what I've always been attracted to is how biology informs what we do, whether that's teaching, whether that's relationships. And the other thing that I think I was really challenged by in the polyvagal theory is I remember about most people would talk about body awareness, and the research would always bring up, well, we'd really test body awareness by knowing your heart rate. And if you have the ability to detect your heart rate, you can be better at making financial decisions, which they've seen in the stock market, literally, or you can be better at, reading people's or reading your own state and understanding and choosing to take action on that. And I could never feel my heart rate. It was always been hard for me. And I think it's a very sort of unknown thing. And I read an article a while ago about there was a married couple and they had been married for, I don't know, very long time. And they were asked a question, well, can you feel your heart rate? And the woman was like, well, I guess the woman was no, sort of like me. And the man was like, well, of course. And that they had been together, had spent so many decades together and didn't even know that difference about each other, because it's a very strong difference. And so I think for me that my origin story came together by seeing the biology come in, understanding the science more, because it's come a long way. It's at the a lot of the science is there's so much more science now than there was 10 years ago. And that, so if you are someone who, and you're listening and you struggle to feel things as much, because I do think that there's probably a biological variability with some people like really feel everything and some people just don't as much. And I think having the language around it has just been phenomenal. So I just want to encourage you. It absolutely shifted a skeptic. So I'd love for you to jump in.
I remember how annoyed I was, honestly, because
I'm sure you were annoyed.
Well, I think it's okay. Anne and I, there's tension between us, which has become a really healthy tension. But I just remember, like, you kept asking me, like, well, can you say it a different way? Can you say it? I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna strangle you. How many ways do I need to say it? But honestly, at the same time, I was like, okay, this is stretching me. This is pushing me. This is really good. This is making me like get clearer and understand for myself better. But I do really remember that you were dubious and you were skeptical, but you were also really supportive. So I want to also say that, like, I think one of your superpowers is just always being supportive, even if you're a little skeptical or you're not totally on board yet. And now we literally run a polyvagal informed business, which is incredibly powerful. So I love you a lot, and thanks for sharing that. And I think it's really relevant, and to your point of like, there's biological variability, but there's also psychological shaping, right? Like many of us are unsafe in our bodies, and so we have trained ourselves to not feel. And so there are a lot of challenges if you are moving into this work and you're like, oh, it's all about feeling. Like, I don't want to do that. So of course, that's maybe another 5 episodes we could be talking about that one particular piece. But I appreciate you bringing it up, Anne. So we're going to move into our second question, and it'll be interesting, and I think probably like just a little bit of a shift, which is, what's one of the biggest tools you've gained or shifts you've been able to make as you've continued to view your life and work through this particular lens? So a tool that you use or a shift that you've been able to make. You've seen this question, so you can take it from either perspective. Anybody want to jump in with that one?
Can I jump in on that? So I want to talk about a shift and a shift again in that both cognitive understanding and an embodied understanding of, and it's interesting because you use so much language. There's so much language to talk about polyvagal theory and how it relates to, your inner experience, how it relates to your clients, whether you're a movement teacher or doing something else. And one of the words that is used often is this transmutation of something, right? Like you transmute something into something else that's going to be maybe more in support of you. And this shift in understanding, both cognitively and embodied, for me, has that my goal is not to be calm. That's been a big one for me because way early on, yes, that supported me so much in this like pause and responding, this, calm is beautiful, right? It makes you increases your capacity to respond versus react and all that stuff. And then, so now this different understanding for me is calm isn't the goal. Self-expressed is the goal. And, it's just more expansive. And I want to speak specifically to something really intense like anger. We need that. And we get to use that. So we're not trying to be calm. And I'll argue we're not trying to be well behaved and demure and soft spoken. Those are lovely things. And, we want to talk. Yeah. We want to use those tools, and we want to also make an impact in a way that it's like we have enough internal safety to call it out, to understand our own boundaries, which informs our own choices and informs like what we might say to somebody else, whether it's in a personal relationship or rando on the street or, in your work like that. So that has been a really big shift for me, and so much of a shift that my program I'm in the process of right now, that I'm working in right now, has been, it's been right under the surface for years. And that shift of understanding for me has made it so that the program is an actual thing now, and not this thing where I'm holding myself back. Is it what people want? And I'm, the kind of experience of kind of operating from the outside in versus the inside out. And so that's been really big for me, that it's, again, like these little, I love little catchphrases, I guess, like the that's nice homework is this other thing I use, is like, shout it out. What is it? Shout it out, say it. And so that gives me a really beautiful permission to say what I have to say, and not like, holding my own self down so that I'm more digestible. And not that I don't want to be gentle and kind and calm and all that stuff, but I do have stuff to say. So
yeah. It's so interesting. It really pushes up against a cultural expectation, I think. And it's like, be loud. I'm just like riffing off of your language. Like, can I be loud? Can I be big? Can I be strong? And also be regulated. So not to get too weird and into the science for those of you who don't know it, but we've talked about it enough. So I'm just going to say it. It's like, we should be able to be highly mobilized and grounded AF, like both feet on the ground and as loud as we need to be. And there is a lot of nuances in this work that tells us, like, we can be held in that ventral space. We can be held in that grounded, safe space and also be highly mobilized. Like, mobilization is not just a negative thing. It's not just fight or flight, right? There are so many more nuances to it. And I'm just thinking about the work that you and I did when Roe v. Wade was taken away from us. And we did this class and we were like, be angry. It's okay to be angry. Nobody should tell you to not be angry. But how do you transmute that energy? How do you shift it and push it in another direction? Right? So still to be in action, to be mobilized, to be loud, to be big, to say the thing that you need to say, but to be so cognizant of it, right? Because the opposite for me is you're just being driven by something that's an autonomic pattern, that you don't, there's not an alignment between the action and the believing or the thinking. So I love this. Thank you for bringing that to the surface. What else? What other tools and shifts has this work provoked for you all?
I'm so in appreciation, Trinity, for what you just shared. And I think I was thinking, oh yeah, like grounded as fuck and also really clear. And I think there's a piece that was implied in what you said that I just want to make kind of explicit, at least for me, which is around this idea of like deeper inner trust. Like there's a discernment and a trust inside you when you're like, I have a thing to say, and I'm not waiting for somebody from out, like you were saying, it's inside out. Like this work, I think, in many ways has created enough space inside me to have to trust my own discernment, and to be able to then stay grounded and be clear. I just was grateful for what you shared, and I wanted to build and add that. The shift that I was going to talk about was really around what Anne and I have been alluding to earlier, which is this idea of expanding positive state. I think, which I use as a a way of building resilience and resource as well. But just this is pretty new. I mean, maybe in the last year, to stop and notice and go, oh, that's nice. Like not a tea or, I mean, I have this like really clear memory, and I think Chantil, I even left you a Voxer, like driving down Esplanade here in New Orleans in the springtime, and all of the Spanish moss on the trees, and there was just this long light, and fucking everything was perfect, and I was just able to go like windows down in the car, breeze. I was like, fuck, life is so good. And just to receive that and be able to and just to like shine it out my hands and smile it out my face, I was just like, yeah. And that ability to pause and be with beauty like that is pretty nascent for me. And I think, if you move around the world like a robot, like a head on a body, just getting your work done, it's not a lot of room to feel those things. And so I'm grateful for that as a tool, but also as a shift.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, I'd like to take a moment to that beautiful description. I love that because it raises you up, and the that's nice, the glimmer, the high point, to be able to anchor into those moments so that I love that Trinity. That's like it isn't there is just no apologizing for that. So there's nothing wrong with it. Absolutely not. It's I feel that your voice comes through with that so strongly. For me, it's interesting, the shift or tool. I would say the first thing I wrote down was that the tool was the concept of safety, or just understanding that and passing that idea to someone. It's like, that you're safe, and that it sounds so sort of trite, but really understanding the nuances of what's going on with you when you are shifting from like not feeling safe, or you're finding the danger and the safety. That when you realize that you have the ability to not only change your breath or change your body to elicit a feeling of safety, and then have clarity to see, is this really an unsafe situation? And be able to, then you have the clarity to assess and then move from that. Because your behavior, like Anne said, there's so much in our biology that drives our behavior. If there is a feeling of unsafety, then even the simplest movement pattern could be just rooted in fear, even though they think, well, I should be able to do this. But that's not coming from an idea of safety. I should be able to pull this strap. I should be able to hold my legs in the air, whatever. And if the movement comes from a grounded place versus, well, I just have to do it. It's where I'm at. That's just where I'm more forceful, and you're just putting it on, versus I could be grounded. I could move with clarity, and then my choices are clear. That was the biggest tool. And so then I can speak. I guess I see that as the tool, because then I can engage with that in a dialogue with the person. Like I can ask, or I can investigate and see if they can find they can, but would it make it easier if we did this? Or how do you feel like you could change something here to make your breath seems a little shallow during that movement? Or just create a dialogue. And that has made it more engaging, more of a partnership. They're more on board. And it's not me delegating. I mean, of course, I'm there to direct a movement or create the program, but they become just more engaged in that aspect. And then for the NSIF people, that's just a whole new ball game when they do that practice.
Yeah. I'm thinking about in Gina's work and some of the work that you do, Brittany, and I think we kind of all are coaches in some way, that we're affording that dialogue, right? That because I've heard Gina coach and we've been in deep discussion around how she does the work that she does. And so I recognize that in all capacities and all containers where we are facilitating some kind of shift or change for others, right? It's a different way of affording somebody to be curious about the experience they're having rather than just pushing through because, intellectually we think we should. Brittany, what's a tool or a shift for you?
Yeah, there's so many, but I think if I just had to talk about one, because I resonate with what everybody said so much. So I'm just going to bring something new to the table for mine. This shift into self-compassion and being so much more gentle with myself through this work. I have, very high expectations for myself. I can be really hard on myself, and viewing how I react to certain things or some of the feelings I get through the lens of the nervous system has created, just so much more gentleness, like true deep love and compassion for myself, not because I should or, but because I actually feel that. And that has been such a powerful shift for me. And I've noticed it's also rippled out into how I interact with my husband and my family. And it's not just the compassion towards myself. And I've struggled with anxiety for years and years, like, all the way back to my teen years. And I remember I used to have almost an anger towards it, like, oh, this is so annoying. What's wrong with me? Make this go away. I wanted it to go away. And now when I have some of those similar uncomfortable feelings come up in my body, I can be curious about it. I also now have the discernment to, be able to decide, okay, is this something that is, like a conflict in my values, or is this coming from some kind of past trauma, or is this, am I just in a bad mood today, right? Like, there's all these reasons why. And so creating that space and that objectivity and being able to look at it for what it is and not create that whole story around things has been just so freeing in a lot of ways. So that's, I would say, one of the biggest things that I've taken away in the ways that, like, I've actually been able to create this embodied shift where it's not something that I have to think about and take myself through this cognitive process anymore. I just do it. I just do it when I start to feel little pings in my body. I'm like, and I'll just pause, and it doesn't have to be this big thing.
Yeah. I mean, you're creating new autonomic patterns. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're creating new pathways. You're creating new ways of relating to your inner experience, your outer experience, and your experience between you and other people. Yeah, you're just retraining your body and your brain. That's very cool. So we're getting close to having to wrap up. I want to just give Anne a moment to say anything about tools and shifts. And then we're closing with kind of a big question. And I know some of you have to run, so we'll do our best to wrap up in a way that's unhurried. Anne, anything to add to this piece?
Yeah, I mean, I love what everybody added, and in the spirit of what Brett needed, I'm also just going to kind of throw another idea on here, which is this concept that I think this work has taught me to shift from really orienting my life and excitement around being a problem solver to more being like a joy expander, or at least also having that possibility. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I just I have been putting together Christmas gifts, and I got you two things I think you're gonna just love that are all about expanding joy. I can't wait to give them to you. Anyway, I just got them in the mail today, so I'm excited about that. All right, so we're wrapping up our questions with, why does the world need this? It's a big question, and I have invited each person just to think specifically to an area of life or living or growth, or like where do you really see this work making the biggest kind of impact?
One of my NSIF practice student, one of them came to me today because last week she had a little bit of a crisis with her daughter. There's a big health issue in her daughter's family. Some cancer is going on or something like that. And her daughter was just upset, couldn't handle it. One more thing hit the pile and she was just distraught. And so my client, who is her mom, went to her with, all her compassion, but also with the nervous system work that I taught her. And she brought her back from dysregulation, some tapping, all the things that we had practiced together. And that's why I think this work is needed. She could help her very distraught, dysregulated daughter, instead of just there, or just a lot of words, help her with some breathing, help her concentrate, just focus, and allow some space to find the calm. So she put into practice everything that we had worked on together with a family member who seemed like she needed it. And it might seem small. It's like, maybe it's not the biggest impact, but that to me just like blew me away. I said, "You did that? You decided to do that?" She's like, "Yeah, I know. I think my daughter thought, who is this person? Who are you right now?" But at the same time, I thought, that's amazing. She feels strong enough and confident enough in the practice that she's been doing for herself that she decided to share it with her daughter. And if somebody felt that good about where they are and they could bring it out, then there's our domino effect.
Yeah.
And people need that idea of comfort. I just thought, I'm amazed. I'm truly amazed. So, and my desire and deep purpose is just to help people unstory themselves from things that have tied them down and find those glimmers, that's nice, but even greater expansion, because there's a lot of power in that. You can move from that. It's fuel.
Absolutely. And I mean, it just takes one person, right? I mean, it is a ripple effect. And many of you know our teacher, Jenny Jennings, she always says, my purpose is world peace. And she's like, and the way I get there is making this kind of impact on one person at a time, and so I'm totally on board. And I think it's really relevant. Like, if one person can share, it's not even you, Sarah, teaching the daughter. It's like, it's the mom saying, this makes a difference. Let me share it with you. I mean, that's the kind of ripple effect that really makes a difference. Yeah. Thank you for that. Brittany, how about for you?
Yeah. If I had to put it in a nutshell, as far as like why people need this, I think it helps put people back in the driver's seat of their lives, where they're not subject to these unconscious reactions that we're having constantly and repeating patterns. And it gives you a chance to learn new tools where you can pause and choose something different. And that's extremely empowering. And I've done this work in the context of coaching and teaching movement, and my priorities and desires have shifted quite a bit since I've been pregnant. And I'm so excited to take this work into raising a child. Like, that to me feels like the ultimate honor, and like the biggest impact that I can make is, raising a child that feels safe and that, I can healthily co-regulate with, and that knows, is emotionally intelligent. And so I'm really excited to take this because it's so universal. Like, we can truly apply it to anything. And now put it into this new journey that I'm on. So that's what I'm most looking forward to.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely see that in my own parenting, the value of this work. I have that experience as a parent, and how impactful it has been on my understanding and my awareness and ability to parent in a more graceful way. Yeah. Okay, Trinity or Gina?
I don't know if this directly answers your question, but I'm having this experience with this lately, is that we get to do this work. Like we get to. And like, why wouldn't you? It's, because it is just like what Brittany's talking about and what Sarah's talking about. It's like, if you can create this space for people to be more self-expressed and safer in that self-expression, which is its own spectrum, right? Your self-expression is its own spectrum. It's like this, it's a deep honor, for heaven's sakes. Like, we get to do this work. We have the embodied capacity, we have the intellectual and cognitive capacity, and it's it's a gift. And so I don't know that that's like, oh, it's this impact. I feel like they're already spoken to what the impact is. And so for me, it feels more like not more, but how I look at it or how I see it is like, it's an honor to be able to do this work, because it just helps people, for heaven's sakes. Like, it's a crazy world. It's really stressful. And it's giving people good tools.
Yeah. If you're watching on video, we're saying goodbye to Sarah, and we're going to have to say goodbye to Brittany here in a minute. It just makes me think that you can't like facilitate this work without doing this work. Who said? Gina, was it you who said that, like, when you go through this process, you never knew you were going to have to pull yourself all apart and put yourself all back together again. It's like, you can't do this. We can't facilitate this without doing the work. And isn't that in and of itself like the root of that ripple effect, So I'm just really appreciating the theme here. Thanks. How about for you, Gina?
I mean, variants on a theme, right? I think I've been thinking a lot lately about like purpose. What's my purpose? I don't know. And I've been kind of on this little like, oh, well, what if it's about reducing suffering in the world? There's a lot of suffering in the world. And maybe I'm not going to get on a platform that's giant to do that. But we spend a lot of time at work, and often it's not great. And leaders have a pretty big impact on how people experience work. And so I think it's important, and particularly I feel like in the context we're in currently, to your point earlier, Trinity, about centered anger and like taking action from a place of clarity, what is mine to do? And leaders play a really big role in either being a settling force for the system they lead and being a kind of a calming force and a force of clarity and galvanizing good change, or they can agitate up a system and create all kind of chaos and trauma and problems. And I feel like even if I'm able to help a few leaders do a little bit better at being more present and more clear about the culture that they're setting and being more intentional about the work they're trying to lead, that will hopefully have a ripple effect on people's work experience, which is a pretty big chunk, at least in this capitalist Western society, of our day-to-day experience. So I feel fairly clear about that. And I'm a GG, and so I get to try to be a good granny with my nervous system work too, because obviously that's important also. So, also just in my personal relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to say more about that, Trinity? Trinity is just putting something in the chat, and I'm wondering if you want to be explicit about that.
This thing has come into my awareness, not spontaneously out of me. It's come into my awareness from the outside, but that this work is a feminist act. And if your first branch of the vagus nervus dorsal, right, the reptilian and the animal of it, and then the newer branch is social, right? Eye contact, which so stems from holding your baby and bonding and, that kind of thing. Like, to me, it's like, it's the gift and the heart of feminism. And I have no problem talking about it, right? But I also am not blind to the fact of how that could be received and is received in the world, right? Because a lot of people think a lot of things about what feminism is and isn't. And the truth of the matter is that, like, it's it's for everybody. And so by dialing into this work in this way in our own selves and then sharing it with other people, it's sticking it to the man, it's sticking it to capitalism. And like I'm, bye, Brittany. So yeah, I mean, there's just such a heavy aspect of that for me, and like even on that biological sense, where it's like, women grow the babies and we give way to them and we bond with them and suckle them and do the whole thing, right? And not a better or worse, or not like a measure, but like we really are taking care of humanity, and we get to do that work. And there's a little bit of an uphill battle with that as well. So that's another thing that feels like it, there's a need for that to be talked about, and offering people an invitation to hold some curiosity about what this means. Because, if we live purely in a capitalistic society, if we live purely in a patriarchal society, if we live purely in all these, these kinds of different things, like we're missing the heart. We're missing the gifts and the heart. And so I feel like this work is easily, and like I said, feminism being for everybody, not for women. It's not, it's not that. It really isn't. But I feel like it's needed. It's the work that we get to do, and that can be hard. It can be an uphill battle. And so offering it to ourselves and offering it for others is quite the rebellious, or maybe kind of a punk rock act, which when I use the word punk rock too, it's the same thing. Like, to me, punk rock is very heart centered. It's not FU for the sake of FU. It's FU because you know what your own truth is, like what Gina was talking about earlier. And so, not to veer us off in this, other kind of topic, but I do feel like that's a big part of this. Like, yeah, a big part of it.
Yeah, I'm Gina. I can see Gina percolating. I was on a call with Porteous on Monday, and he was talking about the because people have lots of questions about, like, when does the nervous system develop, like when and how, and obviously it's developing in utero, but then the social engagement, the ventral aspect, continues to develop as after the child is born. And he was talking about the act of suckling, and how that's why the vagus nerve, the way it innervates the mouth and the facial nerves and the muscles of ingestion, how it is an opportunity to develop connection and safety is through that act of suckling. And I was just thinking, it's almost like I was thinking, like, lots of different kind of analogies, or like we each pass through the womb, right? Like, what do we carry with us? What is the impact? What's the impression? What's the shaping that is made for us as we pass, as we are gestating, but then also we pass through the womb. And I know this is a thing, Gina, it's like, and then we suckle, like we do or we don't, but how do we, this is so silly, but this is what I'm thinking, is like, how do we get people to pass through a new womb? Like, how do we get people to return to their ability to suckle? Like, both physiologically, biologically, but also metaphorically. So I think my point, I'm thinking, like, yes, feminism is for everybody. And also it's not about, whether you have birthed a human or not birthed a human. It's like we all have been birthed, and what is in that for us to replicate. Anyway.
Yeah, I was thinking along similar lines, Chantil, and my thoughts were pinging all over the place. But I have no beef with saying this is a feminist action. And I love the idea of, like, rest as rebellion and all of these kinds of things that we talk about around dismantling systems that are not fully humane. And one of the things I was musing on is, like, what if it's just humanitarian action? Like, what if, to your point, Chantil, like, this, like, metaphorical rebirthing, or however you want to say it, but, like, our world is, like, hurting pretty badly, and there's a lot of trauma on a lot of levels of the system and in a lot of places in the world, and individual birth trauma all the way to, like, war on global scales in some regards. Like, what is the human way that we could have more compassion, turn toward more responding, more connecting. I mean, like, not to get very woo-woo about world peace, but like fucking world peace is what's at stake.
Yeah.
So,
well, on that note, I'm going to let Anne take us home with any final thoughts. Yeah, it's great, ladies. Thanks so much. I love it all.
Well, for those of you listening or watching, I want to give you a cheers with the final drips of my coffee in here. But yeah, this is a longer than usual podcast. We've had such great, deep conversations. I've definitely learned a lot. I would just add for myself with this sense of world peace. And then, like, for me, I have found the nervous system work to be incredibly helpful with relationships, with business, with understanding and thinking about like world peace, world systems. But then we all sort of have our own domain where we get really hung up and stuck on, right? We all have our things. So I felt like the nervous system work, like I've had a lot of like low hanging fruit, easy wins where it wasn't like such a hard, like it's not as an ingrained sort of, I would say, dysfunction or dysregulation within me. And for those who occasionally listen to the podcast, the dysregulation in me comes up when I have persistent pain. That has been an experience that I've had off and on through my life. And I know that many people have had chronic conditions come off and on through my life, their lives. And so I think as you're listening to this, if you enter into the work, you'll get a lot of low-hanging fruit, like stuff that's like easier. But then I also have found it to be incredible in that support system of things that are deeper and a little more ingrained in you, because that's where the real wins can happen. Is things that are a little deeper. And I'm excited to continue to help people in those deeper levels of just unwinding, because you can unwind, but I think it does take a little more time, a little more practice.
Yeah, for sure. Well,
So
I was just going to say, this has been everything that I wanted it to be. So I thank you to Anne for being my co-host, and for Gina, and for Trinity, and for the gals who had to hop off, Sarah and Brittany. Thanks so much for listening. And as always, we invite you to share your thoughts, leave a review, follow the podcast, and then we'll drop some links in the show notes for you to find out more. Thanks, ladies. Love you a lot. Thanks for spending time with us.
thanks, ladies. See you soon.
Thank you
so much.